We're comparing apples to oranges here, because the new Triumph Tiger Sport 800 really deserved to go up against the standard version of the Yamaha Tracer 9. But in this case we've got the GT Plus. Still, we think this video is definitely worth watching for anyone interested in a sporty crossover bike. And we'll tell you why in the video. Hello and greetings from Slovenia. I'm checking in from our crossover tour through Slovenia. We're riding with the Yamaha Tracer 9 GT Plus, the Triumph Tiger Sport 800, plus the Honda NT 1100 DCT ES and the good old Kawasaki Versys 1100 SE. This comparison made a lot of sense, at least in its standard form. That's why I want to point it out right away. A lot of you savvy viewers out there will have noticed it too. These two bikes are worlds apart in terms of price, but what sets the GT Plus apart from the standard Tracer 9 are mainly its radar-assisted rider aids. Up front you've got this unique LED light matrix, loads of comfort features and even solid panniers fitted as standard. But all of these things only have a limited impact on the actual riding dynamics. The only thing that really complicates this comparison a bit is the fact that just like the GT Plus also comes with semi-active suspension. When it comes to the Triumph Tiger Sport 800, which does offer a very attractive price for a crossover bike like this, well, it just can't keep up in that area. And the thing is, a suspension system, especially an electronic one, has a major impact on how the bike handles. We'll do our best to take that into account. Unfortunately, we didn't really have another way to organize these tests. Manufacturers like to show off what their bikes are capable of, and that's fair enough. In this case, Yamaha wanted to highlight the GT Plus, which, by the way, I haven't mentioned yet, so isn't even available with a manual gearbox. It only comes with the new automated transmission, the YAMT. If you're curious about what we think of it and how well this AMT works in real-world riding, maybe check out the other videos from this trip. And hey, might be worth subscribing to the channel while you're at it. Anyway, here's another important point. In its standard version, the Tracer 9 would cost 13,899 euros in Austria, and the lovely Triumph starts at 12,995 euros. But that's only for one color, the silver and black version. If you want one of the other three colors, including this lovely yellow one, you're looking at 13,095 euros. So we're talking roughly an 800 euro difference, assuming you leave out all those luxury features and the semi-active suspension. Why I don't think that's a huge deal, even if ideally we'd be comparing bikes with matching gear, is because so much of the riding experience here comes down to the engine and the ergonomics. The Tracer 9 is a well-known and popular bike and has been for years. Just take a look at the stats from our used bike platform on the 1000 PS marketplace. The Tracer 9 gets searched for 3 times more often than the Tiger Sport 800. No surprise there, it's relatively new. But let's not forget that the Tiger Sport used to be an icon, a real name in the sport touring crossover segment. And then for several years things went quiet. But now we've got the Tiger Sport 800 with a completely new engine, so the deck's been reshuffled, and there aren't that many pure 3-cylinder bikes in this segment, which makes it all the more interesting to see how it performs. I think that's exactly why this comparison is so fascinating, is because the two bikes are quite close in many ways. We had both bikes on our 1000 PS scale. The Triumph, fully fueled, came in at 217 kilograms. The GT Plus, the Tracer 9 from Yamaha, weighed in at 233 kilograms. Of course, you've got to factor in that all the radar tech, LED matrix lighting and the semi-active suspension add some weight. Last year, we weighed the standard Tracer 9 at 226 kilograms fully fueled. So roughly speaking, the standard Tracer 9 is about 10 kilograms heavier than the Triumph, which is where it would slot in weight-wise. At the same time, the engines are also nearly on par with each other. 119 horsepower in the Yamaha, 93 Newton meters of torque, 115 horsepower and 84 Newton meters in the Triumph. So yeah, they're really neck and neck. And I think that's why in this comparison, it's not just about the figures on paper. What really matters is how they feel, where their character traits differ. The CP3 engine, which I think is the big reason behind this bike's popularity, offers the typical smoothness and easy handling you get from a pure 3-cylinder. It's got really elastic gear usability, lovely throttle response, a linear power delivery, and yet surprisingly strong torque for this type of engine, with a slightly edgy, sporty personality. When you really open it up, you get this high-frequency vibration the engine roars, and for a Euro 5+ compliant engine, it's got a proper sound. It's an engine that actually wants to be ridden hard, and I reckon that's something a lot of riders out there really enjoy. Now, a big question mark, new engine on the block. The Tiger Sport 800's engine is, I'd say, even newer in feel. It behaves even more like a textbook 3-cylinder. A bit more linear, a bit more predictable in how the power builds, but still a far cry from dull or watered down. It's actually great fun when you give it a bit of throttle, but you can also cruise around calmly without any fuss. As for that torque difference, honestly, if you were to compare the two side by side on a dyno, I doubt you'd see much of a gap. But when you're riding, it's all about how it feels, and sound plays a big role in that. The CP3 engine just makes more noise, has more presence, which makes it feel more lively. But even so, when you blast out of a tight corner on the Triumph, there's still a touch of wheelie tendency, really brisk acceleration. I'd say 115 horsepower is more than enough, even for keen riders tackling twisty back roads. Both bikes feel fantastic, but I think the bigger differences lie elsewhere, mainly when it comes to handling and ergonomics. And I don't just want to share my own take on that, so I'm bringing in a colleague to join me on camera. Amelie, we've already had quite a few days out here in what I like to call my second home, Slovenia. We've ridden everything from super relaxed stretches to tight, twisty, challenging roads that are a proper blast. It just made sense, and maybe I haven't mentioned this yet. But beautiful Slovenia now finally has a moho, a motorcycle hotel. It's called Hotel Grof, located a bit east of Ljubljana. That's where we stayed, and it turned out to be the perfect base for exploring pretty much the whole of Slovenia, not a massive country to be fair. And what made it all the more interesting is that we had different riders, different bikes, and all sorts of different roads in the mix. So, Amelie, I'm really curious, how did you get on with these two machines over the past few touring days? Especially when you look at them from the outside. The Sport 800 does seem a bit smaller than the Tracer 9 GT. What was your experience like? Which one did you prefer riding?
I have to say, it's really tough to pick just one because both of them have strengths that, for me personally, make them super appealing and really easy to get on with. For example, when it comes to low-speed maneuvering, the lighter weight definitely makes things easier. And that's something we run into quite a bit, like when we're checking out a location and then have to reverse or reposition the bike. The more weight you've got, the more likely it is that something could go wrong. So in that respect, the Tiger is definitely the better option. But I also felt that, especially when things got properly twisty with tight corners and hairpins, I actually preferred the Tracer. It might sound a bit lazy, but I just didn't have to work as hard with it. It leaned into corners more easily, and I hardly had to shift my body to help it along. The Tiger, on the other hand, is a bit more stubborn, but still very agile. I think it's just that I'd ridden the Tracer before, as well as the NT and some of the other bigger bikes, so I'd sort of got used to that. You could say I was a bit spoiled in that sense, but the Tiger's got a character all of its own. And actually, because I spent a lot of time on it today, I really started to get into the groove with it. I can see now that it works really well in its own way. That said, based purely on first impressions in the corners, I'd lean slightly more towards the Tracer.
Here's the thing, like we said before, this isn't exactly a fair fight, and not just because of the extra equipment on the GT+, especially in twisty sections like you mentioned, where the tarmac quality varies a lot. the rougher it gets, the more of an advantage you've got on the GT with its constantly adapting semi-active suspension. And unfortunately, even the tires weren't evenly matched. The Tiger Sport 800 actually joined us a bit later on this trip, so unlike the other 3 bikes which were fitted with lovely, fresh Metzeler Roadtech O2s, the Tiger was still on its original stock tires. And we all know those aren't exactly top-shelf rubber. In this case, it was fitted with Michelin Road 5 tires, which aren't bad by any means, but the difference in tire quality did have an effect on the handling. As for handling overall, I'd say, and feel free to correct me if it felt different for you, especially considering your slightly shorter height, but I found the riding position on the Tracer a bit more upright, especially in terms of upper body posture. It's more in that adventure touring style, I'd say, although funnily enough, the knee angle is a bit tighter. Might be interesting to hear what Pokey thinks as a taller rider. The Tiger Sport 800, on the other hand, is by no means uncomfortable, far from it. But the seating position does lean you slightly more towards the front wheel. The handlebar is also noticeably closer to the rider, which gives it a bit more of that traditional sport touring feel. Whereas on the Tracer, the distance between the handlebar and your upper body, the position of your arms, that's more classically touring oriented. And you mentioned it earlier, it's not just about cornering, but also those low-speed maneuvers and turning around at a standstill. Do you reckon the smaller physical dimensions of the Triumph, not just the weight, but the overall size, made that easier for you, or did it not really make a difference?
Yeah, definitely, and for sure. Even just looking at it from here, it's actually quite funny to see because the seat is really narrow. You feel like you're sitting in the bike rather than on it, which I really liked. And even though it's fairly long towards the front, nothing like the Tracer, of course. It really helps having that sense that you're not trying to wrestle this huge ship around when you want to change direction. Yeah, it's just a bit more manageable overall.
I think that's another thing that really helps, especially for slightly shorter riders. I mean, you're not exactly short yourself, but for those who are on the smaller side, having the handlebar closer really makes a difference when doing tight turns. You don't have to stretch your arms out as much. And something else worth mentioning, the Tracer doesn't exactly have the most generous steering angle. So in that regard too, I'd say the Triumph has a bit of an edge. Now, one last question for you. I already talked a bit about the engines earlier, and they're both quite characterful. But just based on gut feeling, which engine did you like more?
It's a tough one because both engines have qualities that are genuinely great. I wouldn't say either of them has a disadvantage. They just have different personalities, really. With the Tiger, I felt like the throttle response and the immediate feedback you get when you twist the grip, it's hard to put into words, but there's this feeling that the power pushes you forward in a way that's a bit more tangible. You can really feel what it's doing. Whereas on the Tracer, everything is smoother, a bit softer. It still builds nicely, of course, and you've got more than enough power to get going properly. But I think if you're the kind of rider who likes a bike that speaks to you from the very first second, then the Tiger might actually be the better option in that respect, yeah.
Yeah, as you can see, it's hard to pin down. These engines are actually quite similar in many ways. Thanks for your thoughts, and now let's hear what Pokey has to say. From our lovely colleague, we move on to you, our editor-in-chief, Pokey, and you're nudging the 1.90 meter mark in height. So I'll throw the same question at you, but from the other side, so to speak. The Triumph is clearly the smaller bike here. You've already spent quite a bit of time on it, including touring Scotland with your girlfriend, so you've got proper long-term experience with it. Do you ever feel out of place on it, or can this dainty Brit still manage to win over a Colossus like you?
Thanks for the Colossus, Gregor. I think it's probably not gone unnoticed by our viewers that I've taken up a bit more space here than Amelie did. At 1000 PS, we've got it all covered. We're right across the spectrum, and that's absolutely true. Which is why I think it might be interesting for heavier riders too. How do these bikes perform for bigger builds? You're absolutely right. The Tiger Sport 800 is the smaller bike. The seat is shorter, everything's a bit more compact, but I have to say, Triumph has really nailed a bit of a sweet spot here. The seat height is 835 millimeters, not intimidating for most riders, but at the same time, I don't feel like I'm too big for the bike either. Of course, the knee angle is sharper than on the Tracer. That's just how it is. And since you brought up riding two up, there's not exactly tons of space on the back, But Triumph does offer accessories, like a top case with a backrest and so on, so riding 2-up is definitely doable. If you're curious about that setup, by the way, I go into it more in my Scotland video on the Tiger Sport. Now, switching over to the Tracer. Obviously, we've got the fully decked out GT Plus here, but the dimensions are the same on the GT and standard Tracer 9 models. And there, it's clearly more spacious, a bit more room for your backside. When it comes to payload capacity though, the Tracer actually lags behind the Tiger Sport 800. The Triumph can carry up to 224 kilograms, which is genuinely impressive for a bike in this class. And a really practical touch, the Tiger also has a handwheel at the back to adjust the preload on the rear shock, which is super handy. As for the handlebars, the ones on the Tracer are a bit wider, which actually suits me better. I think you mentioned it earlier. On the Tiger Sport, you've got more of that classic sport touring vibe. When you sit on it, you're just placed right in that riding position, and it feels spot on. I also rode both bikes on the motorway at higher speeds, and that's where you really notice the difference. The wind protection on the Tracer is noticeably better. Yamaha claims it was developed in a wind tunnel. At least that's what it says on their website. And well, we'll just take their word for it. What is a fact though, is that the windscreen on the standard model can be adjusted in 10 steps over a 5 centimeter range. That's the same on the Triumph, but the Tracer simply starts from a much higher baseline. I could raise it enough that even at motorway speeds, I was completely out of the wind. And that's something the Tiger Sport 800 just doesn't quite manage.
I love how you put these bikes into perspective based on their real-world practical qualities. You also did the fuel consumption test, at least for the Yamaha so far. Where did we end up? 4.4 liters?
Honestly, I think that's genuinely impressive. A real fuel efficiency wonder, considering the performance on offer, 4.4 liters. And over in Scotland, I had a similar experience with the Triumph, so I'm really curious to see what we get from our measurement now. Best thing is, let's just pop that figure up on the screen. And something else that stood out to me, more so back in Scotland than here in Slovenia with temperatures above 30 degrees, was the setup at the rear. On the Tracer, when you mount that soft pannier, like the one Amelie used on the ride here, and it was fully extended, you really notice it. You can expand the bag further, and the parts on the left and right that were exposed to the rain ended up getting pretty wet. So on both bikes, the wind and weather protection at the back isn't exactly ideal for a pillion.
Very good. So that's everything on the practical side and what it's like riding as a taller pilot. Which brings me to the final question for you. Again, just based on gut feeling, these two fairly similar engines, which one really hits you in the heart?
That's a really tough question, a genuinely difficult one for me, because I think the Triumph engine is a real gem. A textbook linear triple, perfectly tuned for a touring bike. You get solid punch in the mid-range, and then it climbs smoothly all the way to the limiter or with a lovely scream up top as well. But you do notice it's just ever so slightly lacking compared to the larger capacity Yamaha. The Yamaha just feels a bit more effortless, especially when touring or riding 2-up. So for me, in terms of engine performance, the winner is the Yamaha, but only by the narrowest of margins. That said, in terms of price to performance ratio, the Triumph actually comes out on top. Even when you look at the equipment, for example, both have cruise control. We're talking about the standard Tracer 9 now, not the GT or GT Plus. And while cruise control is standard on that model, the quick shifter is an optional extra. On the Triumph, the quick shifter comes as standard, and I think it works really well. The only exception is between first and second gear. If you're a bit sloppy with your foot, you might hit a false neutral. But other than that, the engine gearbox combo is a real highlight on the Triumph. The whole powertrain is just fantastic. And at that price point, it's a real showpiece. Still, hand on heart, the Tracer is just that little bit more exciting.
Now you've heard their opinions, and we're going to quickly touch on a few final points that haven't been mentioned yet. And really, on all of these, I have to give a strong nod to the new Tiger Sport 800, because for its very attractive price, it genuinely offers a lot. First of all, the Showa suspension. It's adjustable, which is already a big plus. Up front, you've got compression and rebound damping, and at the rear, rebound and preload. It's well judged. With 150 millimeters of travel at both ends, that's more than enough. It does the job. It's also soft enough that you're totally fine riding over the endless rolling hills of central Slovenia, right around where our Moho base is located. Loads of single lane tarmac roads twist and turn over those hills, and the surfaces are often pretty rough and uneven. You can roll the whole setup across them without any issue. No back pain, no sore backside. At the same time, when you want to lean into a few bends, the bike stays stable. It doesn't start to wallow. And I think thanks in part to that slightly more front-biased riding position, you get really good front end feedback. You can feel what the front tire is doing, which gives you the confidence to really enjoy those twisty sections. Secondly, the brakes. First off, they're bigger than on the Tracer, 310 millimeters at the front compared to 298 on the Yamaha. And in fact, I'd say that even on the fully kitted GT Plus version, Yamaha's brakes are at best on par with the Tiger Sport 800, if not slightly worse. The Triumph's braking setup isn't overly sporty now. The bite point is relatively soft, but the braking force builds progressively. Once you've got used to it, you get a good feel for it and can brake hard when needed. The front lever is adjustable and the rear brake is easy to modulate. So all of that checks out. If anything, I'd say this: Yamaha, fair enough, maybe these brakes are still acceptable on the slightly cheaper Tracer 9, but on the GT Plus, they're simply not good enough anymore. If I had to nitpick something on the Triumph, it would be the mixed LCD TFT display. It's functional, sure, but in an age where so many bikes are coming with large full-color TFT screens, it just feels a bit outdated. So if you're someone who values a modern dash layout, you might say, yeah, I'd want more here. Especially since even the standard Yamaha Tracer 9 offers that full TFT setup. Aside from that though, both of these are solid bikes, and I think the final buying decision really comes down to a couple of key factors. First, ergonomics. Which riding position suits you better? The fully upright one or the more sport touring front-end focused layout? There's only one way to know. Go for a test ride and try them both. That's when you'll really feel which engine clicks with you more. It comes down to nuances. Personally, I'd say I'm team CP3 simply because, like Boki mentioned, it responds a bit more confidently and sportily to throttle input. I also find the sound just that bit more appealing. I've always been a fan of the CP3, and while I absolutely agree that the new triple from Triumph comes very close, it still doesn't quite match the Yamaha's triple for me. And with that, we hope we've been able to give you some interesting insights into this exciting matchup. Definitely check out the other videos as well, where we dive even deeper into the technological features and innovations of the Tracer 9 GT Plus. Otherwise, why not come and join us here in beautiful Slovenia? Pay a visit to Moho Grof because Mohos are simply brilliant, motorcycle-friendly service through and through. Most of the tours and stunning routes we've ridden here come from the fantastic suggested rides offered by the hotel itself. They've got a big touchscreen display right in the lobby where you can easily download the GPX files straight to your phone, and off you go, ready to follow the route. Top-notch service. You can even wash your riding gear. What more could you want? A good dinner and a cold beer in the evening? Sorted. This is actually a hop growing region where Moho Grof is based, so for beer lovers it's definitely worth a visit. And with that, I'll wrap it up for good. Thanks for watching, thanks for sticking with us, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.